Doing things with love as the medicina of Marianismo. I have replayed moments I have been connecting with my abuela Raquel through epigenetics, often without realizing it. The obvious connections would be that I love wearing ipiles, where some people may look down on it. I host hammock homecomings on the land, and I believe my grandmother's craft and healing remedios are passed down to me through her guidance in those intimate moments with those called. The last story I will leave you with is one I still feel in my lungs. My father always says wonderful things about his mom and also shares that she had a hard and sad life being very poor and always having to be the responsible parent while his father drank the money away. One thing my father always says is that his mother did everything with love. My grandmother would be at her sewing machine, producing products to feed her children. She cried a lot, they said. One day, when I was 7 months pregnant with my first full term pregnancy, I got a wild, no, not wild, intuitive, an instinctual idea to sign up for a sewing class with my local Parks and Rec. I had always wanted to learn how to sew, and that period in my third trimester seemed like the perfect time. I signed myself up for the beginner apron making 6-week class. The day of the class, I was on edge and anxious about my high risk pregnancy. I remember picking a fight with Mike, my husband, and heading to class early to calm down. I waddled into the fabric store where the class was being held, and I started to feel things. I felt calm. I felt inquisitive. I felt eager. They told us to pick out fabrics for our apron. I found myself feeling the textures and smelling the sample. I felt sentimental. I couldn't make sense of it because I didn't have any prior connections to sewing. I brushed the deep feelings off as shame and nerves. When the class started, the teacher was an older lady and she was so kind and patient. Feeling very pregnant, I found myself having a hard time paying attention. When it was time to start our projects, I started worrying about the argument with Mike and I felt behind in the apron making. I suddenly just burst into tears in front of the sewing machine in class. I just couldn't stop. I asked the teacher if I could leave my apron and start again the next week, and she said, of course. The other participants gave me some pregnancy support about how pregnancies bring waves of feelings, and I thanked them. I sat in my car and sobbed. I couldn't breathe. I felt so much sadness and grief. I felt a longing. I felt something was missing, and I was feeling the impact of that loss. That day was 9 years ago, and now I truly believe, given everything that I know about epigenetics and ancestral technology, I believe I was crying as a connection to my grandmother's epigenetics. I imagine she cried often while very pregnant with each of her 3 babies and sewing at all hours for survival. I realize now she was the call I felt to learn how to sew, like a protective plan to always be able to provide for myself, like nesting in preparation for baby, like bilateral stimulation and rhythmic flow through machine and craft. Maybe I was trying to be closer to her, and we both cried that day in the fabric store. She got me there. She picked out the fabric, and we cried at the weaving of our motherhood stories. What a loving and intentional act she did, and I tried. I think I will try again. Page 114, my Marianismo.